Welcome to the Storymakers Podcast, a place where curiosity and play meet to spark faith through the imagination. I'm your host, Mel, and I'll introduce you to new friends who will share hope for the kids and teens in your life, with a dose of encouragement for us grown-ups too. Let's get the party started. Hey Storymakers, Mel here. I'm super excited for you guys to meet my friend, Robbie Gaines from HopeWords. Hey Robbie, so happy to have you. Thanks for joining us on the pod today.
Thank you for having me. As a listener to the podcast, I am pumped to be here. So
yay, so excited. Well, I met Robbie last year at a conference called HopeWords, which is a golden secret. People, you all need to go to this conference. It's so amazing. It's in West Virginia, and I've never been to West Virginia. It was my first time. And we just saw what you guys were up to. We loved your taglines and thought Storymakers needs to go visit this place and meet some new friends. And it was so worth it and so amazing. So we're so happy to have you on the pod 1 year later, and we cannot wait to see you at the HopeWords conference just right around the corner.
That's right. April 4th and 5th. I'm excited for it.
Well, Robbie, we are dangerously curious about everyone who comes onto the Storymakers podcast, and we want to know all the things. And so we love to know how your imagination has been captured by the gospel, and let us know a little bit about you. I know you're a pastor. I know you're a co-founder. You wear many hats, and you have kids, and your wife runs a ministry business that has to do with flowers. There's so many wonderful things. So, Robbie, share with us how your gospel imagination was captured. Were you a kid, a teen, a grown-up? Let us know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mel. My gospel imagination starts probably when I was in third grade, and it was the first time that I heard the gospel, but it wasn't a revelation of, oh, this is great, but rather I heard them preach the gospel, and at that point in my life, every time that they gave a command, which for me meant them saying amen, you just responded to what they said. And they give this gospel presentation, which was different than the prayers that they had done before. And in the middle of it, they say, raise your hand. And so raised my hand. After we said amen, they call me into this back room to ask me, hey, you made a decision for Christ today. Tell us about that. And I'm just sitting there like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And they said, why'd you raise your hand? And I said, well, because you asked me to. And so they begin to just talk through everything that they had just said. But this time they're talking to me. And in that moment, I believed that they could have a conversation with God. I believed that when they said that they had a relationship with him, that they were doing what we're doing right now. But I didn't have that. And they were asking me to do something that it seemed like if that was going to happen, wouldn't Jesus be the one that revealed himself to me rather than me trying to see him? And so in my third grade mind, I didn't hear the gospel and say, thank God that he came for me. I was hoping that he wasn't real, because if he was, I felt like he passed over me. And so 16 years old then, fast forward, I grew up in central Pennsylvania. There was things about God around us, but it wasn't anything of interest for me. And that was on purpose, that I didn't really want to dive into that. And 16 years old, and my sister was a part of a gospel choir. And her life had been radically transformed by Jesus. And again, now it's those thoughts of he's not only passed me up, but he's come into my home, right? And passed me up again, right? But I began to see something new in her. And I would shy away from conversations, but I always wanted to find out more. And one day she had eventually moved out of our house, and I had this thought, maybe I'll go to church. and maybe I'll find out more about it. And on that ask, I made an ask on a Saturday night to the pastor, his wife, and I went to school with their son. And I was thinking that surely, they're not going to say yes. It's Saturday night. I gave myself just enough room. And for me, then to get a very quick, we'll be there in the morning. It changed the lens of what I thought about the church, but then also the people that changed my sister's life. None of them look like me. They were all from Mobile, Alabama, New York. They were from all over the world. And it was a beautiful picture of diversity that I saw in my introduction to what the church was. And I always wanted to be like that group, but I never knew what made them different. And it was going to church. It was hearing about Jesus in a fresh and new way, with more curiosity than just cowardice and worry that, I'm going to hell. And at that point, they had a message about the tabernacle, and we got to the end where in the youth room they had this really tacky veil that went across the whole room, right?
I mean, we've made them for camps.
Yeah. Okay. Yours was probably a lot prettier than this one. And the youth volunteers are like rolling the sides and the veil is torn. It might have been cheesy to everybody else in there, but for somebody that their whole life to that point, I had thought there was a separation between God. To hear that, to see that, and then in my heart, mind, soul, and strength to think, man, if that's the Jesus that has changed my sister's life and these people around me, like, please, would you come show me in a new way? Man, did he ever. And my life was forever changed after that. I went from a very shy and again, I think cowardice would be a word, and I became courageous, and I became bold in my faith, and bold in the way that I wanted to love other people, because, man, I knew who I was, and to now have Christ, it changed everything for me.
It's so cool. Well, listeners, for all of you all that haven't met Robbie is so friendly and warm and engaging. And we rolled up to West Virginia, and you knew who we were already. And it was just so captivating to get to meet you and your whole family. Yeah. Robbie and I were chatting about a month ago, and he was talking to me about the widowed places. And here in Storymaker World, that's exactly the place that we want to be in the hearts of kids and teens and grownups, because we all have these widowed places. And Robbie, you just described yours so beautifully. And so what is it about words that you think have the power to penetrate those spaces, those widowed places?
Yeah, so when we think about a widow, we first think of a person. There's somebody that has lost their spouse, right? It's marked by what it used to be. And a widow is not just the person that has lost their spouse, but also it's a place that's marked by losing its inhabitants. And so in West Virginia in particular, there's a narrative that is told about it. There's plenty that people may have to say about it. But the thing that we found most dangerous, the thing that we found to be most prevalent, was actually how people from there talked about themselves, and how they shared their story. And it was of, there's nothing to do here. There's no jobs here. If you have any gifts and talents, you need to go somewhere else so that you can use them and be fulfilled and paid and compensated for it. And ultimately, that just leads to there's no hope here. And so this conference of HopeWords that we started, very creatively, we just wanted to have words of hope for our community. And what came of it was out of that understanding of how do we care for the orphan and for the widow? How do we care for the place that identifies it in the same way as what the widow would? And then not only just do that as a way that would just be seen as, hey, this is a place that just needs your charity. We just need you to give to this. Certainly, there's need, no doubt about it. But we also think that there's a mutuality that comes from when you engage with the widowed place. There's more inspiration that you might find here. And we believe that the Spirit of God moves in those places that are unexpected. We believe in a God who brings order out of chaos and speaks to the deep. We believe that God is working in those places beyond where we might normally find them or find him working. And so for us, the words that we use to describe ourselves, we wanted that to be held in a place that people wouldn't normally see that happen. And it becomes a inspiration for us to, if you're coming to Bluefield, West Virginia, to show off how good of a writer you are, like, hey, cool for you, like, good on you. Like, like, nobody goes to West Virginia for that. So it kind of levels out where we're calling for the people who are called to steward words, who love words, who love God, and come to this place and be inspired together in that.
Yeah, that was what I found was so incredibly encouraging and beautiful. If these incredible writers and artists coming together to share their gifts and their words of encouragement in a very unexpected place. I mean, I'd never been to West Virginia. I didn't even know how to get there. It was
but you came in singing Country Roads, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah, you were singing Country Roads.
What are the best biscuits in West Virginia? What is this biscuit place? I think going forward in life with curiosity gets you into new places that you are going to be encouraged by. And I thought that was so beautiful. And what I'm so excited about what we get to do all together in this next year is, like Robbie and I have been talking about, like, encouraging young writers and story makers alike, the future story makers out there who are going to share powerful words of their own from, as artists themselves. One of the things that was so beautiful about what you've encouraged us by is just by the way in which the gospel continues to nourish you and your family, and spurring on the next generation to do the same in their vocations. And so, Robbie, I would love to hear you share a little bit more about your vision for how you see young artists and writers, and what you hope for them and how their imaginations are captured.
Yeah, I think at the core of what HopeWords is, and certainly what I hope it continues to be, I come back to before I am a co-founder for this organization, before I try to do that, I'm a husband, I'm a dad. And the way that I was introduced to story makers was out of looking for resources of how do I share a story that changed my life, that shares about God, about Christ, in a way that I can engage with my boys, right? And so this story making has to be at the core of who I am personally, right? And the investment that was made into me by so many other people from the church, I can never pay them back for what they gave to me. But I can do my best to pay that forward. And so for HopeWords as an organization, we take very seriously that we're husbands, we're fathers, we are wives, we are mothers, we are people that are a part of a greater story. And for me, in the pastoral and the ministry side, man, I appreciate that you knew that I knew you, because I knew that you knew my family as well and took the time to listen to us. And I feel like for especially youth, they are always looking for who can I tell about myself to. And I just, that is such a lonely place when you find out that only everybody else is looking back at their own reflection, right? And even if they find interest in you, most of the time it's for a brief moment or until they find something else that is about them, right? And so to have young writers who come and are a part of HopeWords, our hope is that that we see you. Like we're looking for you, not just looking for what you can do. Like the calling that God has for your life starts with a calling from a good God that wants to be in relationship with you. And then from that, your imagination, man, like what could be held in that could show the world a greater story than what it's being told by itself about itself, right?
Well, it's so cool. I love how you said, Robbie, when your imagination was captured, that you became very brave. And I think that's a core element of being a writer or creating content or taking a risk, is to know that the author of the world has created you and you're an image bearer. And then that gives you the bravery to like step out and to try a thing. And, it may not always take off or become what you imagine it's going to become, but that's part of the process of the whole thing. But you need a community. You need other people cheering you on and spurring you forward. I think that's a big part of it. Robbie, how have you and your family been shaped by the gospel story as you guys are growing into it all together and as your kids are getting older?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I know that for Silas this year, when we got to Advent, he is country as country can be. Here in Shelby, North Carolina, where we live, he works on the farm every Saturday with Paw, and he loves all the farm animals, all the things. And we got to Advent, and my son was able to share the entire story of the shepherds. And I was blown away by it. And then I look on our table and I see this little set of camels and all of these different
creatures.
I'm trying to think of one unifying
so many
thing.
Wild creatures. We just turned all of the characters into something.
And man, his imagination to be able to speak through that did my heart so much good. And also our story is one of we loved where we were at in Bluefield, and I certainly hope that as it comes through that I love Bluefield. I always did, always will. Care for those people, still feel a sense of being able to shepherd from a distance there. But our youngest son, Ivy, was born with spina bifida, and he has multiple medical complexities, and so that place couldn't care for him medically, and so we had to move. And entering into a new perspective on the world through the lens of disability was one where everything that I had hoped and dreamed was out the door, right? But also at the very same time, there was more revealed through it that I never would have imagined. And for Ivy in particular, he's not able to speak. He's not able really to hear much. He doesn't do much other than exist. And in his existence, he is strong. He evokes faith. My guy is the bravest guy I know, right? And for me, what I see in my family, again, comes back to this thought of widowed places and how the gospel reaches us in the most unexpected ways. I lament all of the things that have been taken or I feel have been taken, but also I find a great joy that I have a new perspective on in my weakness. He is strong. I am grateful that I have a son. I have boys that all they know is to love one another. And one of them might speak it through speaking of the shepherds, and another may be speaking it through his eyes. But I do know that those boys, I'm going to continue to love them. They are going to love me. But our home will be marked by that gospel that has changed our life. And man, I'm so grateful for that. And I don't think the podcast is long enough to talk about my wife. But through her, in particular, you brought up flowers. Like, we started flowers and doing a flower farm. It's called Fostering Flowers, and the idea behind it is to foster belonging for people impacted by disability. And flowers are something that they're beautiful and they're gorgeous, but they don't taste very good. They don't have necessarily the productivity that you would seek from. And we think the same thing with the life, that there is something valuable to beauty. And how do we foster that belonging between differing abilities and from people to people and engage in that? And so my wife, she started that with this thought of, I asked her why flowers, and she said, I don't know, it just seems like this is what I'm going to be doing in heaven. Oh. And I've held on to that one of, man, I hope there's something in my life that I can grasp onto that says, man, I'm going to be doing this for eternity. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, well, and it's such a Christian perspective, the lilies of the field for the moment, and everything is passing, and it is for the moment. And I think what is so special about your family and your imagination in particular, Robbie, is that you have this perspective that Jesus is running towards you and your whole lot all the time. Yes. And I think as we parent kids and teens and we go through all of the ups and downs, it's so important to have that perspective, because otherwise then you sort of live in this weird despair place, and this place where you're reaching up. And also, if your perspective is that salvation is all up to you for your kids, right, then that's just a dead end. And so I would say to all the grownups listening out there, take a note from Robbie, because you just have this beautiful perspective and imagination of Jesus just moving towards you all the time. And what a gift that is. So Robbie, before we sort of roll out into the next phase, I'd love to know, like we are always asking, what story captured your imagination as a kid, like a story from the Bible, or just, I love Roald Dahl. That's what captured my imagination. And you're in the book space. You're like you get to hang out with all the cool illustrator writers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you may have a favorite.
Well, I would first like to say we don't have a writers conference because I'm a writer. We have a writers conference because we needed more writers, and I knew that I couldn't do it.
You're a facilitator.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
and I found I love to read, and so growing up, I always loved sports. Sports was my thing, and that's really where ministry started with me, was with my football and basketball team, and all of that. And so continuing on in that as a chaplain for different sports teams. But really for me, the book that I read year after year was called Pig at Play. And then the second book was a very small biography about Jackie Robinson. Ooh. And so in particular, Pig at Play is about this kid that is a pig that has no business on being on the basketball team, but does all the work to get to it, and then makes the game-winning shot. Like that's how I pictured it. And then I would always partner it with Jackie Robinson, and it was as if I could see in his story one of the impossibilities of all of the things that he had to go through, while also trying to figure out the world around me, where born in the 90s, early 2000s, I knew that my world was different than his world, but I knew my world was different because of what he did, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, that Jackie Robinson book was one that always captured my imagination of the talent of him, and what he did was to get to this point where he could make the game-winning shot. In his case, to steal the base, to hit the home runs, to do all those things, which is what I wanted to do more than anything. But what happened because of his life was that he blessed other people. And that, through the story of Jackie Robinson, I think was very shaping in my life from a very early age, in who I wanted to be.
Well, that's so cool. I love that. Everyone's answer is so different. And then it makes you want to read whatever they read. So
yeah, absolutely.
I love that. And then Robbie, you're a dad. Are there things that you've read that have encouraged you besides Storymakers? Is there anything out there that you would say, or maybe it is Storymakers, playing the parts, like getting involved with your kids, like what's kind of, gotten the gospel story in your household going?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of them is a book called The Book of Belonging. And
yes.
I figured that you would know that one, because the first time I saw it, I was like, they need to know each other if they don't, right?
Yeah.
So Silas is now 5 years old, and we're at the part of, it used to be whenever there were words on the page, he was so quick to just flip to the next page, right? But now he's working through words, and he's learning how to put them together. And I tried to convince him actually yesterday that West Virginia was a compound word, and he was very quick to tell me, no, it is not, Dad. We're going to let Mom do the teaching, okay? So for us to be able to step in now to something like the Book of Belonging and really capture his imagination, and for me to listen to him of what do you think it looks like to go from dark to light, and for us to walk into his room and turn off the light, and then also have that resource to be able to talk through it in a really concise but beautiful way. I'm grateful for that book.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, Robbie, it's been so great to have you on today. And we always want to encourage our listeners to read, connect, take a beat, 5-10 minutes. We're not talking about like an hour-long Bible study with your 5-year-old, but just a quick chapter, and, just getting curious and remembering that we all come from the widowed places, and that Jesus is running towards us all the time. So thanks, Robbie, so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Today's episode of the Storymakers podcast was made possible by the Storymakers team and our generous community of donors. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the Storymakers podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the show with a friend or two, and use the code SMPodcast10 for 10% off your next adventure. Remember, be free and have fun.